Welcome to The Way I See It. In this 6-part series where I feature General Surgeon Dr. Titus Odedun, this particular interview looks at his property empire. My first question was to ask him how and why he got into property in the first place.
I did make a conscious decision, fortunately at a very early age, to go into property because, first of all, I needed a property to live in with my family. So rather than rent, I decided it's better to buy one because instead of paying rent, I was paying for my own property. So that was my first foray into property. And then while I owned that first property, something very interesting happened that changed my view of property completely. If for me, it's a place to live in, as most people actually think. But then we had a very bad weather in the UK. Many people remember that bad weather, which was badly forecasted by the meteorological office of the BBC. And there was problem with my only property at the time. So I needed a builder to do some work for me in the property. And as it happened, he was going to give us an estimate for this work at about lunchtime. And I didn't want to leave my wife alone with a strange man. So I decided to come in during my lunch break as a doctor at the local hospital and give my wife some assistance. And this builder turned up, as they do, had a look around. And for one reason or another, he asked me to follow him to his house to hand me over some paper. And I drove behind him to his house. And when I saw where this builder lived, I was absolutely stunned. This was a builder. He lived I thought I was doing very well. I was very proud of myself. When I saw where this builder lived, it was better than my own house. My house was a 4-bedroom semi-detached house in Greater London with a garage and a 80-foot garden. And all my friends thought I was living in a palace. I thought I had arrived. And when I went to this builder who lived in a similar neighborhood, just about 1.5 miles from where I live, he lived in a completely detached 5-bedroom house, which he had extended with a conservatory and beautiful garden. And I just said, gosh, how did this man, a builder, which looked down on them that they are educated people, they are handymen, how did he manage to get a place like this? I went to him and I sat at my desk and I said, there is something good about properties. So I just decided that I mustn't just be content with just a 4-bedroom semi. I must aim higher in properties. So within 18 months, I had bought a second property on a 10-year mortgage, and then another year I bought another property, and then it just mushroomed from there. Well, initially, they were spread all over the UK because to start with, I couldn't afford to buy very expensive property in central London. Some of them were within the Greater London area. Hackney, for example, I had a terrace house in Homerton in Hackney. They were all spread over where I could afford at the time, or where the opportunity was at the time. It was only as time went by, because my mortgages were 10 years, when I finished paying for this, I had more leeway and I was able to afford more expensive properties. And I finally moved into central London, now buying properties in Mayfair, Marylebone, and so on and so forth. So those came subsequently. But so now I have properties a lot here in central London. Some of them are completely residential. They could be flats or maisonettes or houses. Some of them are mixed use. I bought the London Medical Center a few years ago, which was 3 buildings knocked together into a medical clinic, which is completely commercial, that part of the building. The top floors of this property, the last 2 floors, were completely residential. They were flats. So that property was mixed use, partly commercial and partly residential. And I had a similar clinic in Liverpool, which was partly commercial and partly residential. They all have their advantages and disadvantages, especially when it comes to the tax point of view. When you buy a commercial property, you have tax relief on the whole of the property because it's commercial, and therefore from that point of view is beneficial. Also, if you do sell, there is also some quite important tax advantages which accountants will tell you. First of all, the rate of tax is lower on commercial properties. And when you sell, you also have some concessions. It used to be called indexation in those days. The accountant will take their slide rule. If you buy the property 20 years ago, the inflation at that time is XYZ. If you sell them 20 years later, they will add up the inflation from the time you bought the property to the present day and allow for that before you pay capital gains tax on this. There's also now, after that was abolished, they introduced something they call entrepreneurial relief, which they factor in before you pay any tax. The disadvantage of commercial property is you pay very high business rates, and that sometimes can cripple many commercial ventures, especially nowadays. The government has increased, or the local authorities have increased business rate beyond reasonable level. So that's one little drawback of commercial property. And also, if the business goes under, which many businesses are doing, you may have long periods before you get a tenant into a commercial property. Residential property now, especially so-called buy-to-let, in recent years, the government have created disincentives. For example, the stamp duty on second and third property is much higher. There's an extra 3% or so if you buy a buy-to-let. Also, they've abolished tax relief on the income you get from these properties. You pay a lot of tax on buy-to-lets. The advantage, of course, you've got an asset which is going up in value. And over the years, if you finish paying your mortgage, at least you've got a property there that is giving you income for the rest of your life or until you sell it. I deliberately took my mortgages over 10 years, especially in those days where endowment mortgages were very, very good, especially with profit endowment, that you pay interest only on your property to the bank or to the building society, and you pay an insurance company a monthly premium, which is the endowment premium. And at the end of the period of endowment, the money that's invested is enough to pay off your mortgage. So your mortgage is paid off, whether over 10 years, 15 years, 25 years. And so whether you take your mortgage over 10 years, 25 years, the interest you pay on the same property is exactly the same. It doesn't matter how many years. The only difference is that if the period is short, like 10 years, your premium is slightly higher than if you take it over 25 years. So by the time you add the two together each month, it's only slightly higher if you take a 10-year mortgage than if you take a 25-year mortgage. It's not even twice. And most people don't even realize that. They just think you're crazy taking a 10-year mortgage. Now, the little problem with that is that however small the difference, you pay higher each month if your mortgage is so short. And I had to do additional work. I had to do locum work. I had to do a lot of running around trying to earn extra money, especially at the time we're talking about when the interest rate was so high as 18% at one stage. So the interest rate you pay was very, very high. Of course, the properties were also doubling in prices every 3 years or thereabout. So it's sort of both ways. So I had to do additional work. Well, I looked at the way our economy was going. And I know that if I work solely as a doctor, I would be comfortable, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't really be rich. Doctors are not known to be rich. Comfortable, yes. It's like professional accountants, lawyers. They're comfortable. That the only way for me, if I want to reach the level whereby I could send my children to private schools where I have to pay school fees, I have to send them to university and pay tuition fees and accommodation fees, I knew I had to do something different. So right from when I was a junior doctor, I started thinking along those lines of I started an agency, an employment agency, when I was a junior doctor, which my wife ran from home. I had to do something additional from a very early stage. So I had that entrepreneurial spirit, maybe, if you like, DNA, that I was just wanting to do something extra. Well, that's interesting. Somebody once said, some people are born great, others achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon their arms. To be an entrepreneur, some people have DNA. People say, and I have nothing against any race because all human beings are created by God. But people often say, oh, Jewish people have entrepreneurial spirit in their DNA. Well, it's true. They're hardworking. But English people also, Indian people also, African people, in every race, you have entrepreneurs. This is what they call the American dream in the USA. So some people may have that extra advantage that they are born into a family that does business, therefore they have it in their DNA to be an entrepreneur. Some people actually look at the environment, they look at other people and they say, oh, if Jane can do it, so can I. If Jack can do that, so can I. And they aspire, to do something for themselves. So you can be born with the DNA, but you can also acquire it. Yes, that's an interesting question. It doesn't matter which career you have. If you want to get into property, if you really want to get into property, you can. And people will tell me, oh, look at things today in London. If you buy even a very small flat in London today, you can't even raise the deposit. That is only half true. My advice to any young man or woman who wants to have this entrepreneurial spirit, be focused, have a dream, and don't be put off by any difficulty in your way. You have to make sacrifices along the way, no question about it. You have to forget about designer, if you're a lady, Louis Vuitton handbags, or if you're a man, a young man in your 20s, go and spend £120 on Nike shoes. You have to set a window, say 10 years, I'm going to close my eyes, to all the things that my mates of the same age are doing, and then get additional work, and don't go into any debt, don't have any debt on your credit cards because you're paying 28% interest on whatever you have on your credit card, so you won't get anywhere. So just close your eyes, to all the things that everybody around you is doing, and just go in a myopic way for your goal. And you can be done. You have to have a deposit. You can still get a property in London for, say, $275,000 for a flat. The banks, before the banks start lending you any money, they ask for 10%. So you need £27,000. People say, how do you put £27,000 together? Well, if you take an evening job, apart from your normal job, in a bar, just serving bar, you get £250 a week doing that. In a year, you got 12,000. By the time you work for a few years, 3-4 years, you have 30,000 as a deposit to entice the bank manager to part with the money. But most people want to go to sleep when they leave their normal work. They don't want to go and do extra work and come back home at midnight. So it is not easy, but it can be done. So my advice to young men and women is that you don't get something for nothing. You have to make some sacrifices. You have to give it your time. and deny yourself of all the pleasures that your contemporaries are having, because in the end, you're going to have the last laugh.
Thanks for watching. I hope you picked up on some amazing nuggets which you might use as you begin to build your property portfolio. Be inspired. See you next time on The Way I See It.